A way too early happy Thanksgiving to you and yours from us here at the Pats Interference Podcast. I'm Andrew Callahan from Boston Herald. As we record late on a Monday night, it is going to be a short week that feels like a long one because, of course, whether you're, somehow still in school or you have work, before we can get to the fun of this week, which is very much going to be Patriots Vikings, 8:20 Thanksgiving night, we have to get through the next couple of days or some of the fun stuff, okay? That's not going to be going to class or finishing up any sort of projects. It is going to be going through Pats Jets film review, which I promise we're going to do quickly. And this is not going to be a segment where I say, okay, we'll do 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm still talking in 12 to 15. No, we are going to run through that because I know you want to get to the goods. And honestly, so do I, because I had a great conversation with Shawn Syed of the Daily Norseman. It's an SB Nation blog. But Shawn's work is more known on Twitter, where he does some of the best, and I mean the very best in a saturated corner of football Twitter, X and O content, playbooks, breakdowns, all of that. And he's been specializing in the Vikings this season as he tries to kick off a side hustle with his writing career. His knowledge is second to none. Very good conversation with him. You want analytics, you want scheme, you want technique talk. We had all of that, and I promise it's coming up. But we need to have our vegetables first, finish up our homework, our work over the next couple of days. Let's get through it, and we'll move on. So, Patriots 10, Jets 3. God help us, okay? Now, coming off of what I thought was probably the most straightforward game I had ever covered, with the Patriots winning into Colts before the bye, 26-3. This, of course, trumps that. If you've been listening, you know our post-game review pods go the good, the bad, the game balls, what would NFL film say, and then we get into mailbags. Look, the simplest way I can put it, and we'll have a little bit more detail here and some nuance, is that the good was Marcus Jones and the defense, the bad, the offense, and the game balls go Marcus Jones and some defenders. What would NFL film say? We'll get to that in a second, and we just have one mailbag questions. But one mailbag question from Ireland. We're big in Ireland. Very excited to share that. So here's the deal. I don't want to leave it at that because, of course, as you know, I write up 2,000 words on the game and break down all the film and have all the stats here. At some point, we get diminishing returns and things like that, which, again, I promise is why we're going to go quickly here, even if this is a long preamble. But it deserves parsing out why the Patriots have scored 2 offensive touchdowns, and they've scored 2 touchdowns on defense and special teams the last 3 weeks. Now, let's start again with the good part of that. Specific to the defense, they pressured Zach Wilson on over 40% of his dropbacks yet again. That is an elite knockdown number. You are going to win games more often than not when you do that. And I wrote before the game that the Patriots are playing better than anyone with a 4-man rush. This came out Sunday, and it was kind of talking about the plain magic of their defense right now, which is elite across any kind of rankings, DVOA, EPA scoring, et cetera, but specifically the pass defense. And the way the Patriots worked against Wilson was similar to 3 weeks ago. They didn't blitz him only 5 times. He was 0 of 3 with 2 sacks. He got creative with a 4-man rush, and everything was working. Judon a sack and a half, Wise 4 pressures, Kyle Duggar gets his first career sack. This was excellent. In the back end, nothing exotic. They disguised some coverage against Wilson to force him to hold on to the ball, and he's a guy who's still struggling to read defenses in his second year. But overall, when you stop the run like they did, and they allowed 1.65 yards per carry whenever the Jets were not scrambling. So when the Jets were trying intentionally to run the ball, they gained an average of about 4.5 feet. That was it. And when you rush 4 effectively with 7 back in coverage, you're going to win a ton of games. It's exactly what happened here. There are a ton of hilarious stats to go through. My favorite, the Jets gained an average of 2.8 inches per play in the second half when they only had 2 yards. So defensively, you dominated everywhere up front. Juwan Bentley in the middle played an excellent game. Read more of the film review as far as the details of how that happened. Marcus Jones, of course. Look, we don't need to belabor 84-yard game-winning punt return, touchdown. Somehow that play also took 21 seconds. If you look at when that punt got off at 26 seconds and then he goes into the end zone, there's still about 7 left. It ticks down to 5, whatever. Nobody cares. It's just, how many 21-second plays do you see? Well, no one especially cares when it wins you the game. Marcus Jones, people who followed the draft and our coverage here knew that he left college doing things like this. 100-yard touchdown in the final minute against SMU, then ranked last year. And he shared the NCAA record for career return touchdowns with 9, kick and punt. This is what this kid does. And it was the first punt return touchdown across the league in the entire season. Couldn't come at a better time because the defense dominated, special team scored, and the Patriots get out with a win. Last good part, and this is kind of hedging a little bit between the good and so-so. Mac Jones set a career high with a completion percentage, 85.1% of his passes. It doesn't put any extra hair in his chest or points on the board, but the best part about this was, and this is the lead into my film review in the BostonHerald.com, this was old Mac again, okay? He was sharp. He was efficient. He got the ball out quickly, and we could talk about the 6 sacks. Really, 5 of them certainly were not his fault. You could argue about a 6th. I leaned in the way that it wasn't his fault, but ultimately, he was living within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. Only 1 pass attempted beyond 20, fell incomplete. Nelson Agholor was blanketed. This is how he's best suited to play, because 32 out of his 33 dropbacks were either standard shotgun passes or under center play action. And on those play action throws, he was 6 of 7 for 98 yards. Hallelujah, it happened. Okay, Matt Patricia running play action and passing more on first down. Again, still would like a little bit more considering their success rate passing on first down was 64% to 16 running the ball, and it was still about a 50-50 split, but I digress. The Patriots handled Mac Jones, who again performed like he did in his rookie year, in the same way they did that season. We talked about play action. Half of his first 10 attempts were screen concepts. Part of this was to displace a very good and fast-flowing Jets defense, but these were safe throws. They were available. They were defined reads. That's how you get a quarterback back on track. And that's what the game plan was. We're going to displace the Jets with all this different misdirection, be it the play action on the screens, and we're going to try to get Mac back in a rhythm. And this happened when he is going, as I said, 85.1% completion percentage, 23 or 27, 246 yards. Not a single play also, perhaps most importantly in a game like this, where he risked a turnover. That counts as progress from where we've been the first half of the season. Okay, done with the good, on to the bad. A lot around Mac was bad. 6 sacks, as I mentioned, most of those in the offensive line. Trent Brown didn't start. And what was a, quote, coaching decision. I think it was a little more complicated than that, since he was good enough to start every single game before this and play every single snap before Sunday. He gave up 2 sacks. Yadni Kajust on the opposite side. 1 sack allowed, 3 hurries, and a holding penalty. Not good enough. The problem is Patriots don't have a replacement for him because Isaiah Wynn gets hurt. David Andrews gone before the end of the first quarter with a thigh injury that, according to my colleague Karen Garigian, actually won't be season-ending. He could come back in late December or early January. They just have to wait it out and see. But the problem with the offensive line is you are now springing leaks on both sides of the ship. Okay, you can only fight, on so many fronts with a losing war for this offense because James Ferentz, smart, reliable, tough guy, not a good run blocker. He's getting moved everywhere. Kajust, I mentioned, a vending machine for pressure. And Cole Strange, actually a decent game, but then gets manhandled on 3rd and 1 in the final offensive snap, which goes backwards because for whatever reason, Matt Patricia thought it was wise to go behind him and James Ferentz with the game potentially in the balance. So offensive line was bad across the board. This is nothing new. We do not need to beat or touch this dead horse. Other places that could have had improvement, receiver. Tyquan Thornton has gone into witness protection. He's had 1 catch in each of his last 4 games. And his playing time finally went backwards. Nelson Agholor steps up. Okay, it's his time to shine. I was high on a Nelson Agholor rebound from earlier. I'd go back to the summer, even in the spring. I thought a couple more deep passes hit. His numbers are going to go up and at least kind of positive regression. Nope. 2 catches, 18 yards. One of those catches was just a downfield screen in the first drive that meant nothing because they were backed up in a 3rd and long. The receivers in the offensive line, it's not going to cut it. And again, it's nothing we need to stay too long on because you saw it. You knew it. And ultimately, so do the Patriots. So, game balls. Marcus Jones, done. Juwan Bentley, 9 tackles. You know what? We'll take it back from Bentley. Sorry, Ben's got plenty of praise. He's on a slow heater here the last 4 or 5 weeks. Kyle Duggar, I just mentioned the Patriots' 3rd and 1 last offensive snap. He had a tackle for loss on the Jets' last offensive snap before the punt that won the game for the Patriots, where he's sniffing out this check down to Zach Wilson because that's all Zach Wilson threw, sometimes into the second row. but he was already making his way into the flat before that ball gets out of Wilson's hands. He had 6 tackles, the sack, tackle for loss. He's covering tight ends. He's manning the edge. He's fitting runs in the inside, chasing them down from behind. Kyle Duggar's doing it all. He gets a game ball, and Steve Belichick, who was a step ahead of the Jets all game. When the Jets retreated into kind of their core running plays, the Patriots were all over it. This is an excellent game plan. It was a well-called game. He deserves more credit than he's getting because, you can always go to the nepotism well and whatnot here and there. 2 out of his last 3 seasons since he took over play calling, Patriots have been number 1 in scoring in the league. And right now they're trending that way again. So game balls, Marcus Jones, Kyle Duggar, Steve Belichick. Small shout out, Damian Harris. 15 offensive snaps. He got 10 touches, though, over 90 yards. And my favorite number, 3 missed tackles forced, according to PFF, which normally that ratio, which would give him 3 out of 10 touches, 30% of his touches result in a missed tackle. Those are Ramondre Stevenson numbers. And so for Damian Harris to rip off a 30-yard run started by missing a tackle is a very, very good sign. So shout out to him impacting both the run and the pass. Next, what would NFL Films say? Okay. This would be NFL Films at its finest because we all know what we saw, all right? This was a hideous game until Marcus Jones is running into the end zone. But they would dress this up as far as physical and the rivalry and the smack talk and this and that, everything building up to this final crescendo, okay? And I don't know what the lines are going to be, but that as you're watching those highlights and it's a struggle, yes, but even the sacks of Mac Jones, just the thud and the mic'd up players, everything is going to be so great. And then the Patriots finally break 3. And it's their 14th win, 5 out of their last 6. The handshakes, the locker room, Dietrich Wise hugging, and I think picked up Robert Kraft in the locker room postgame. You'll have to go watch the video the Patriots posted to Twitter. All of that makes it in there. And the propaganda that they do down in New Jersey in NFL Films headquarters is perfect for this because you would watch those highlights in the segment of this fictitious Patriots season-long review that we keep updating every week in the pod. And you're like, that game was awesome. And we know it wasn't. That's okay. Maybe you liked it more than me. That's fine. I'm just saying it was not a very good football game, stylistically, statistically, by any sort of objective measure, whatever your definition of objective might be. But NFL Films dresses this up, and we were all longing for it. Now, you were longing for the end of Pat's Jets talk. Patriots 6-4, Vikings 8-2. That should be moderately more fun. I still think it's going to be an ugly game. But before we get to that, one last break and mailbag question. So this comes all the way from Ireland. Pat's interference big in Ireland. Love to hear it. This is from Mike Clancy at Mike Clancy 1998. He wants to know, is there any possibility of a coaching change mid-season? Mike suggests changes the offensive play calling or Dante Scarnecchia coming back in for the rest of the year. He says also if they have new offensive coaches next year, would that mean Judge and Patricia leave the staff completely or would they find a new role for them? Suffice to say, Mike is not too happy with the offense. Now, look, first part, coaching changes mid-season. I think it would have to become an obvious and total and just disaster for the Patriots to admit, specifically Belichick, that Patricia can't call plays anymore. Because that's a move that once you make it, you can't go back. It's similar to how ideally you would handle the quarterbacks. Well, obviously that's been, in my opinion, bungled so far this season. I think it's an issue where you go back a month, and I'm writing about how much better Patricia is getting against week 5 against Detroit, week 6 against Cleveland, week 7, the quarterback thing throws that, all to crap. And then week 8, some more adjustments against the Jets. It's not been good. In fact, it's been really bad. 2 offensive touchdowns, matching 2 touchdowns from special teams and defense over the last 3 weeks. I don't think Dante Scarnecchia is going to come back. Certainly not in the middle of the year. This is a guy who I can tell you is a very active babysitter for his grandkids and enjoying the time away and doing some media. So Belichick, if they're going to change play callers, I don't think takes it on himself. Your options are then Joe Judge, who, if you listen to the pod, or I can't remember where I said this last time, is not necessarily as involved. My understanding is in the game planning part of the passing game, as you would expect from a quarterback's coach, or certainly what we thought back in the spring, where this might be a passing game coordinator, running game coordinator situation. Or maybe someone like Nick Caley, who's, yes, involved with the tight ends, but really on a game day, that means he's in charge of two players, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, and they need coaching, and they're very involved, as we said many times in the pod, much as any other position in the offense. But if Belichick wasn't going to name Nick Caley the play caller when he was the most experienced offensive assistant coming into the season, why is he going to do that now? And the argument really is, Patricia sucked. I think partly that's fair. Part of it's also, the offensive line is bad, which might be his fault too. But you can only call a game so many ways around a bad offensive line, which is all to say that I don't think it's going to happen. And if they do get new offensive coaches next year, don't hold your hopes up for anyone coming in from the outside, because the Patriots are a homegrown operation. Okay. Patricia and Judge only came back because they were here in the first place. They're not bringing in anyone to install a new system. Okay. This is Belichick's offense as much as it was ever Charlie Weiss's or Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien's. Josh McDaniels and O'Brien and Patricia and Judge started here as low-level assistants. They grew up in the system, thinking a certain way and molding it and then coaching it. And the Patriots are staying true to that system, for better or what seems to be for worse. So, yeah, potential in the offseason. Maybe they find a new role for Judge or Patricia, or take some of the stuff off Patricia's plate, which is way too much. But overall, I don't foresee much change. If anything, maybe towards the end of the season, but both of these, I would put it below 10%, if anything, and we're going to throw some random numbers out there. So sorry to disappoint, Mike, but that's how I see it. In the meantime, Patriots Vikings preview coming up with Shawn Syed. You're going to hear me screw up his last name right at the start of this, which is just, look, it's a long day on a short week, and we got to get moving, but he does outstanding work. Find us on Twitter. Obviously, any sort of feedback, feel free to email me at @Callahan@Boston Herald. Until then, enjoy this episode. We will reconvene over the weekend, a day or two later than normal, but it'll be full Pats Vikings recap and then Bills preview. Until then, here we go. Shawn and I on the big Thanksgiving game. All right, Patriots Vikings week is finally here, and it's going to be gone before we know it because, of course, Thanksgiving night, the Patriots are kicking off Minnesota, 8:20, first time since Super Bowl 52. We won't spend much time on that. Instead, we are going to spend time on the 2022 Vikings, and to do that, we have a brand new guest, Shawn Syed from @SyedSchemes. That's SYED. If you know our friend of the pod, Doug Kyed, he spells his last name the same way, KYED. Shawn, I've been following you for a while, strictly for your playbook and excellent X's and O's content. Lo and behold, you're a Vikings fan. You reached out a couple of months ago, said, hey, if you're free for Vikings week, which I was, book me, and here you are. So welcome.
Andrew, appreciate that so much. I'm 1 year strong on my lifelong Vikings fandom, writing for the Daily Norseman this year. And, Doug, his last name being Kyed, it does me a slight disservice. I say Syed, but I'm not going to hold it against Patriots Nation for, keeping Kyed and Syed all the same.
I'm killing myself. So I asked you that before we came on, and it was via DM Sy-ED, and I thought it was just to stress the Sy and Ed were separate, but screwed that up. So we're off to a running start here. As the Patriots offense might be, and perhaps the Vikings offense might be, as we look at this matchup, which is going to set up potentially not quite as ugly as 10-3 Patriots Jets from last Sunday, which we just covered in my film review, but something similar. And before we get into any of that, I just want to understand the Viking fan perspective on the Patriots, right? They have not played in 4 years. The Patriots still have some of that brand equity built up, obviously, from 2 decades of Brady and Belichick. People understand that Brady has gone on and moved and had success without him. But here come the Patriots, expected to be a 500 team at 6-4, and everyone here on this side of New England understands they've been feasting on a soft schedule. What do you make of them? Initial impressions when you think and hear the Patriots at 6-4?
I really think it's so hard to divorce the Patriots from Bill Belichick at this point, and I think that's kind of shown even more this year, right? Obviously got a different quarterback in there than Tom Brady, but the defense is it's so sound. And I think that on special teams, they really execute their job, as you saw in that Jets win. But just having that top end of a defense, as long as the offense can kind of get the wheels going a little bit. And the Patriots and the Vikings, I think they find themselves actually in similar positions where, I don't think anyone's expecting these teams to be playing on that last weekend in February, but still teams who, when they're in the right situations, particularly on offense, they have quarterbacks that can execute. Now, Patriots don't have Justin Jefferson, and that certainly could be the difference on Thursday night.
Yeah, it should be. And it's funny because here in New England, and maybe just specific to people who follow the team every week, if you listen to the same themes come up from the players, and I'm sure this is true with Coach O'Connell in Minnesota, you can understand what points were driven home in the team meeting from Bill Belichick. And the word they've used here through basically a day as we record on Monday night is explosive. And it starts with Jefferson, obviously Dalvin Cook. And that would be the starkest difference between the two offenses, right? Like the Patriots we need to stay on schedule. Otherwise, the whole day has gone to crap. We're not going to get through our itinerary or our to-do list. And we're going to be kicking field goals and missing some as it was against the Jets or punting the ball a whole lot. The Vikings can score in a hurry. Now, does it always happen? No, of course not. As we'll get into some of those numbers. But also on primetime, which before we came on, and I asked you to kind of explain the primetime Kirk phenomenon, because from the outside perspective on the Vikings, it's like Kirk just craps his pants every time they're under Sunday night and Monday night. And this has to be the most credible source I've ever used. But there was a Reddit thread that actually broke down some of the numbers for Kirk. It turns out primetime Kirk, as far as I can see, again, with this very credible single source, which I would never take to radio, was actually showing that the numbers aren't that bad for Kirk in primetime. And it seems to be more of a national narrative. It's just that his level of competition in these kind of games elevates, and he does not, as a guy who's probably between the 10th and 14th best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, that 10 to 14 range. And because of that, I try not to buy too much into the Kirk primetime phenomenon, but a good point in that offenses do not operate at their highest levels when the quarterback is in suboptimal positions, right? I think the Vikings coaches do a great job of putting Cousins in a great spot. But if you watch the game against the Cowboys, I mean, he was pressured on something like 60% of his snaps. And I think it was the Chiefs lost to the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl where Mahomes was pressured. I think it was like 40%. So he was running around all day. And, if you're going to have pressure in your face all day, things are going to be certainly suboptimal. I think that Eagles game early in the season on Monday night, that was a really tough circumstance where the Vikings just didn't have the offensive threats. I think that, Kevin O'Connell would say openly that he maybe didn't do the best job kind of preparing for that game, or maybe not preparing, but presenting their offense in that game. So I'm not expecting a 3 interception night on Thursday night as that Thanksgiving, winds down. You're on that last slice of turkey, but I try not to buy too much just into, it is primetime, so it's an issue, but more thinking about, and something I think Patriots fans understand, that when your quarterback's just not in the best situation, particularly with pressure or tight coverage, your offense just isn't going to look that great all the time.
Yeah, and that's a great point because it speaks to the pocket-bound nature of both of these guys. Like, they're not creating on their own to extend plays on third down, something I've referenced all the time throughout the season. And Kirk Cousins, while certainly a better quarterback than Mac Jones, fits that same type of prototype. Okay, he's not going to extend plays and hurt you or kind of adjust his arm angle or make some sort of crazy throws, but the way he can operate within structure is much better. It's just a matter of getting him off rhythm and off timing. So, all right, let's get straight into the Vikings. Patriots, as I mentioned, coming in at 6-4. The Vikings are 8-2. The analytics, not big Minnesota fans, which, look, you can go into different analytics, DVOA, EPA. The folks who listen to the pod know we stick mostly with DVOA. By DVOA, the Vikings are the 23rd best team pending the results of this Monday night game with the Niners and Cardinals, 19th in offense, 18th on defense, 26th on special teams. Their last 4 games, the game you just mentioned, 40-3 loss to Dallas at home. Before that, game of the year, 33-30 win at Buffalo. Then you're looking at 20-17 win at Washington and 34-26 win over Arizona at home. 7 of their 8 wins are by 1 possession, and both of their losses by 3 or more scores. I think that says as simply as anyone can about why the analytics aren't so friendly to the Vikings. But you look at the roster, and at least for my money, it's still a well-rounded team. What are those numbers hitting besides the things that I just mentioned?
I think that those numbers really highlight that the team isn't the best team in the league, right? Just because your record is really, really good does not mean that your team is on that top end on average, right? I do think at some point, the question of, is this team good or a real contender kind of gets thrown out the window just because you've won enough games to, at this point, you're going to be playing hopefully late in January and in that playoff picture. But again, when the team is put in suboptimal situations, great things don't happen. And they've had a lot of bounces go their way. That Bills-Vikings game was probably the most stressful game I've ever watched in my life. But again, if your team is down by multiple scores at that point in the game, it's great to see that your team has the ability to come back, but no one wants to play in those situations, right? I think when we look at the Raiders this year, I think they played a whole lot of one-score games, and I think their outlook on the season looks a whole lot different than the Vikings, right? Now, the Vikings are obviously in first year with Kevin O'Connell, first year with their new GM, so they're in that kind of competitive rebuild phase, and I'm sure they're more than happy to already have 8 wins on the board. But I think I'm certainly a believer in DVOA. You look at the EPA per play numbers, the expected points per drive, all those sorts of things. They don't love the Vikings. And I think that those maybe speak the truth a little bit more than the record. And I consider myself an optimistic guy and absolutely optimistic on the Vikings, because even with all those numbers, the playoffs and football is such a beautiful thing that when you get thrown in that situation, look, a lot of these games are going to be one-score situations. A lot of them are going to have really volatile environments. And especially if you have a pass rush like the Vikings, you can create a turnover and you can win games that you probably shouldn't be able to win, maybe kind of in Madden or in a more kind of controlled situation.
Right. And we hear all the time about how, your record of one-score games is not necessarily predictive year to year. And that's fine. That's true. It's not going to hold up over a larger sample. But I think within the same season, it's not so much luck. It's just something you hinted at before that, like, this can kind of propel you forward. Once you're in that situation before, and whether by hook or by crook or some good luck, when that situation comes up again, you at least have this built-in confidence that you've earned from demonstrating your ability in close games. Hey, we can win this. You're not spending any extra energy being anxious or wondering, how is this going to go? Are we prepared? Like, for better or worse, you have experiences positive is going to help you a little bit and give you that edge, in which, like you said, in a league that is just defined by 17 regular season games and so often comes down to the fourth quarters, you're ready for that. So the numbers might not like you. It probably won't matter because it sounds like they're headed to the playoffs. We'll see what happens then, because of course, nothing is more random than the NFL playoffs. But what I look at when the Patriots have the balls, we get into Thursday night's matchup, there's not a whole lot random going on there. Again, they have 2 offensive touchdowns in the last 3 games, and they have 2 touchdowns by way of defense and special teams. So when I look at this matchup, and especially in light of their last game against the Jets, again, they win 10-3, only score 3 offensive points. The edge pressure is a real problem. Like, Trent Brown, for whatever reason, quote unquote coaching decision, doesn't start, comes off the bench, gives up 2 sacks. Opposite him, Yannick Kajust is the bookend, giving up a sack and 5 pressures total. And lucky them get to see Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith here, who have combined for about 15 sacks this season. So when you look at Smith and Hunter, are they kind of entrenched at both spots on the edge of that defensive line? Are they moving about? Are they using stunts in games? Like, how is the new Vikings defense employing 2 of their better players there on the edge?
So what I really love about good kind of units or parts of units on football teams is when the coaches put the players in the best positions to succeed. And you really see that with Zadarius Smith, because the way that I think of the offensive line, I think of it as a weak link system, right? So you really want to have kind of 5 solid links in your chain, as opposed to maybe one really, really strong bookend and then kind of lesser players along everywhere else. Obviously, you'd love to have good players everywhere. But because of that, I think if you have a weak link on your chain, the Vikings are going to find that, and Zadarius Smith is going to be lined over that guy all game long. Because I really do think he actually likes to rush from the inside. So where you have Danielle Hunter on the outside, he's a really unorthodox pass rusher. I love watching him play. And I think if all Patriots fans, when you watch him, it's his body just moves in a different way that I guess I can't really explain. But again, Ed Donatell, the Vikings defensive coordinator, loves to get Zadarius Smith on the inside, get him against just a matchup that they are really favorable in. So it's not just you see Z Smith kind of running around the end. It's going to be, bookends on the outside, Zadarius Smith maybe walking around, looking kind of scary in the middle, and then really attacking whoever you think is your weakest link on your offensive line.
And now, if that name, Ed Donatell, sounds familiar, you're probably thinking of those early 2000 Ravens defenses, played some linebacker. I think he went to Atlanta there as a player towards the end of his career.
I don't know anything about Donatell's playing career. I do know, though, that he's a Fangio guy through and through. I think he followed Fangio through San Francisco and Denver. I'm going to have to dig deep in the history books to think about Ed Donatell's playing career.
All right, not that deep, because that was when I was first started watching ball. And like I said, early 2000s, it's not that far ago. But the reason I bring that up is to something you just mentioned, this kind of Vic Fangio tree that has seemed to blossom almost as quickly, and certainly in response to all the Shanahan offenses and the Shanahan acolytes that are spread across the league, including, of course, Kevin O'Connell, head of the Vikings. that system, a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 6. The Vikings are not blitzing a lot as we stay with them. 15% so far, according to Pro Football Reference, which puts them bottom 8 in the league. And behind that, a lot of zone coverage. But they are good against the run, 13th by DVOA and 2nd by PFF, which is not good, obviously, for the Patriots who want to run the ball. Before we get to that, because obviously I think the Patriots are going to need to move the ball on the ground. The thing about Smith is an interesting point because they have their pick of the litter, whether you want to go after Cole Strange, James Ferentz, or Yadni Kajuster at right tackle. But how well do you see them kind of planting Zadarius Smith on one side, understanding he's going to draw attention, and then manipulating whatever the protection is on the weak side? Because the Jets got a sack on the very first play of the game on Sunday, doing something exactly like that. Quinnen Williams across from Cole Strange, who's been benched in 2 straight games. And then they're rushing 3-on-2 over the right side with a twist that gets a free runner and a sack.
So I think that the Vikings do have that sort of package. They kind of call it their boss package, where it's more or less three people on one side to the offensive line. When they've been doing that, I don't think they've been doing it as much to just isolate that matchup. I think that what they sometimes like to do is force you to kind of have your center point one way, get your center and one of the guards towards Zadarius Smith, and that ends up opening kind of one-on-one elsewhere. So I know where the Patriots love to get 5 guys on the line and create one-on-ones. Haven't seen too many kind of crazy things on the defensive end in terms of forcing kind of matchups elsewhere, but I think the Vikings are more than happy to take their one-on-ones in those situations. So, if I know the Cardinals, for example, if you can force the protection towards Zadarius Smith in some way, it certainly is going to help those other guys. And I mean, you're going to have to win one-on-one if there's 2 people on Z Smith kind of somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Back to the idea of running the ball, because, again, there aren't a whole lot of teams that have been running over this Vikings defense. Obviously, Dallas had a lot of success doing whatever it wanted. Do you see any plays being repeated? Teams stealing plays from previous games against the Vikings, saying, hey, if we run counter weak or we go power strong or some outside zone weak, like this can really work against them?
I think that whatever play gets you 40 points, like the Cowboy. No, I'm just kidding, Andrew. So, certainly one thing that the Cowboys really hang their hat on duo. So that kind of downhill inside run, or not exactly an inside run, but those 2 double teams inside. And the Vikings defense by design is a light box defense, right? I think they play at a crazy high percentage of light boxes. And that's, I think, a smart defensive philosophy at this point in the long arc of football evolution, in that, hey, we're fine if you're going to constantly run the ball for 3 yards. We're going to force you to dink and dunk because eventually you're going to make a mistake, right? But the Cowboys, they were really able to take advantage of the Vikings interior defensive line. And I think that duo, right? Like I put up a clip earlier today just of, the Patriots running it really well, right? If your running back has good footwork, has good vision, if you can kind of be sticky on those defensive linemen and kind of get hands on those linebackers as well. The Vikings, my favorite Vikings player, Dalvin Tomlinson, I'm not sure if he's going to be back this week. He's been off that calf injury for a little bit. So, I think the Patriots, at least the run game coordinator, has to be looking at the Cowboys film thinking, oh man, we are going to be able to rack up yards on the ground for sure. And that's something that, of course, Ed Donatel, who I thought you mentioned his playing career, not his coaching career. I don't want to say you're old or anything for those 2000 years, but yeah, I think that Donatel's they're going to need to clean something up, be it linemen trying to split those doubles, or really just maybe even holding those offensive linemen and keeping those linebackers clean. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's not something the Patriots are haven't seen before. I mean, there are different iterations. Like they're coming off of, Robert Saleh's system, which obviously started in Seattle and he's in San Francisco, but they played a lot more too high with the same general philosophy of just, if we can stop the run with 6 or 7, that's what we're going to do and devote more resources to the back end. And that's been the trade-off really across league wide. Scoring is way down, has been last 10, 11 years as far as the league low, but rushing is up at an all-time high according to yards per carry. And so defenses will take that. The Patriots, though, will take that because, again, they're not scoring offensive touchdowns. So when you look at areas that the Patriots should be able to attack, if Dalvin Tomlinson does not come back, are there any areas, let's say in both extremes, where the Patriots should have an edge based on the games you watched, and then areas where maybe besides Zadarius Smith against pick your offensive lineman, where Minnesota will have the greatest edge? I think that the back end of Minnesota is interesting, kind of on both extremes, because Patrick Peterson, who actually has been playing just very well this year, I think he is going to be a point where Minnesota, they have the advantage on that side of the field, or if it's something where they want Pat Pete to kind of follow around. In contrast, on the other side, it's not that they have a bad corner or anything, but they're on their, third string. They've been banged up over there. I think that when you have a cornerback where sometimes you need to shade a safety over, it kind of unfounds a lot of what you want to do. And that Fangio system likes to have those kind of one-on-ones, particularly on the backside of 3x1 sets, so they can send just more guys to the front side of the coverage. But I'm not sure if New England's necessarily going to be able to take advantage of that, because I'm not going to pretend to have seen the Patriots all year. But from what it seems like, right, there's not Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen coming in on the opposite side. So I think that's why it feels like the Patriots are going to have to take advantage of that interior defensive line, where they may not be able to kind of have that down the field passing attack in the same way where maybe a team would hope to have.
Yeah, no, you talk about a weak link system in the offensive line, and I'm in total alignment with you there. The Patriots approach their team building and receiver in the same way. They would rather have a bunch of 2s, 3s, 2.5s, and just hope that depth will get them a mismatch somewhere. But then you run into stretches like we've seen the last month and a half, and this is obviously tied to the quarterback play, where just guys aren't getting open because you don't have anyone drawing or having some sort of gravity with the coverage to pull resources away from anyone else. Defenses are saying, sure, we'll play you one-on-one. Devontae Parker, who gets the least separation in the league, according to GPS data, or Nelson Aguilar, who's not playing and then only has 2 catches for 18 yards on Sunday when he does play again, or Tyquan Thornton. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to exploit those matchups beyond maybe some backside slants for Parker. They might try some double moves, but then again, with the safety over the top, and they like to stick in these kind of 2 high shells, even sometimes against those 3x1 sets, maybe those shot plays just aren't going to be there. Flipping to when the Vikings have the ball. I loved this 2018 game. Do you remember anything about this 2018 game?
So I don't, because I've had the good luck of not spending a lot of my life watching the Vikings, and coming in as a Vikings writer for this year, the just built-in pessimism of Vikings fans and Vikings writers for how many times they've had their heart broken. I've heard about the 2018 game so many times now. I'm just looking forward to this matchup. But no, please tell me all about the 2018 matchup, and do it with a smile on your face. I know the Vikings fans listening aren't going to be too happy to hear it.
Yeah, so there's nothing particularly special. Like, you look at the box score and it goes probably as expected. Like, Kirk was fine and he had 1 touchdown and 2 picks, but the Patriots double Adam Thielen, and Stephon Gilmore gets Stephon Diggs, who was hobbled at that point but largely shut down, because that's what Stephon Gilmore did to everyone, even people surely he was walking by in the grocery store in 2018. But ultimately, the Belichick introduced or reintroduced this amoeba package where they would have 1 down lineman over the center, and then you'd have 5 or 6 defenders kind of just milling about, walking around, in order to confuse the quarterback. And they used this down the stretch of that season to good effect. And what it did, obviously, besides muddy the reads, is change the protections and force offenses to play a little bit safer, because they want to get the ball out quickly, or they're going to play kind of an inside out protection where you're foremost concerned with anything up the middle, and you just don't know who to declare who's going to blitz. And people who want to go way back in the time machine, I mentioned this actually in our last episode, Eric Mangini unveiled this against Brady in 2006 when he was a Jets head coach. And it worked, because if you can't identify, a proper mic or what kind of coverage they're in or any kind of rush, you're really screwed. And so it affected Kirk, obviously, as the Vikings scored 10 points. So beyond that, like, I look at that as something the Patriots could easily return to as a veteran defense on a short week, saying, we get to know their core plays, and then we're going to throw this wrinkle at them, and hopefully that helps us in really high leverage situations, 3rd down, friend zone. How much of this, as someone who studied Kirk, do you see as being a pre-snap battle, amoeba package returning, or not?
So what I do like about kind of things that Kevin O'Connell has bought from the Rams, kind of that McVay tree, and certainly the Vikings had it previously, but it's a progression-based passing system. So it's not the same where it's, I need to know exactly what the defense is in. Obviously it helps, but the way the passing reads are, it's, first receiver, second receiver, third receiver, right? So you're kind of reading space almost. It's kind of weird to think about. So I think the disguise where it would come in is, as you said, that offensive line, because the Vikings have had some issue kind of passing off those stunts. And, candidly, if I'm the Patriots, I'm kind of fine just lining up 5 guys on the line and saying go, right? I think that what I love about what Belichick does when they have that kind of 5 guys on the line or 5 rushers in any sort of way, you're forcing your offense into 5-0 protection. There's not that many fancy things you're going to do with offensive protection. And a lot of times it's going to end up either in a one-on-one, or what you hope not to see on Thursday, or maybe what you do hope to see, is Matt Judon kind of looping into the inside, getting that free rush. And Dallas was able to take advantage of that. And I would expect the Patriots to do that. So to me, it feels like, maybe save that kind of amoeba package for another week, because I think that you should be happy to kind of just go ahead, go 5-on-5 and, go win the snap.
Yeah, and it's a good point, too, about Judon because, they're going to be dealing with backup left tackle. Darrisaw got the concussion against the Cowboys. I don't think in today's NFL anyone's returning from a concussion in a few days. And so probably their most talented offensive lineman out, Blake Brandel. Am I saying his last name? Am I at least going to go 1 for 2 here?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Blake Brandel, is that the correct pronunciation?
Well, I think so. That's what I certainly think.
Okay.
I think he played like 40 snaps, and we're all gonna know his name, hopefully just for positives on Thursday.
Yeah, Blake Brandel gets the kind of like the umpire treatment or backup offensive tackle. Like you only know about him if things are going poorly. And look, nothing went well for the Vikings against Dallas, but I think he'll see a lot of Matt Judon. And I think that idea of forcing one-on-ones because Judon has gotten so many sacks, you can call them coverage or rush, but they're a lot off of those TE stunts, which I write about seemingly virtually every week in the Herald because the Patriots have been so effective at it. But the other part about this is the Patriots only get to play games with Kirk Cousins, whose stats I might as well rattle off now because he's having a good, solid season. 63.6% completion percentage. He's averaging 246 yards per game, 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. It helps, though, to have Dalvin Cook in the backfield. 799 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns for Dalvin Cook. The Patriots don't get to play with Kirk unless they can stop Dalvin. So this running game, is this more of an efficiency? We're going to get 5 yards per carry and kind of stay on schedule, or is this explosive? As we let off talking about, I've already been hearing from Patriots players that him or Justin Jefferson can kind of take it to the house in a hurry.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook, it's been really fun to watch him this season because, look, he just has it still, right? He still has that juice in his legs, which is great to see. And they're a heavy zone team. They like to run kind of behind that left tackle to that open side a lot. They'll hook around with that tight end when they're running strong. But to me, I don't know, it's kind of, it is really hit or miss, right? They had that huge run against the Bills. They had a big run against the Dolphins, but NFL defense, as they, again, continue to evolve, they're evolving to stop zone schemes most particularly, right? They have players on the inside who can gap and a half or 2 gaps. So to me, I don't see the Vikings rushing attack as this kind of world-beating thing, whether it's Nick Chubb or the Browns. And that's nothing against Dalvin Cook. I just think it's hard to have consistent efficiency in the run game because you have to have so many things go right in the run game, right? It can just happen where it's one block that kind of slips a little bit and the defense gets a TFL. And I think that the early down success rate for the Vikings is just unfortunately low. And as I said, they are a light box run team, so they do get advantageous looks. And I think Kevin O'Connell wants to establish the run. I don't find myself to be the biggest kind of establish the run believer, but they're going to give Dalvin Cook his touches, certainly. And so I think boom or bust may be kind of the way to look at it. It really just kind of depends on how those interior guys are able to do. And the Vikings, I think their run offensive line on the interior is a little bit better than how they pass protect.
Yeah. And sticking with the offense, it's very similar, at least by DVOA, how they're built. We talked about 20th versus the pass on defense, 13th versus the run. Their offense is 23rd passing and 12th with the run. So I think it speaks to what you just mentioned is Dalvin Cook still got that explosion, that juice in his legs that'll make up for a lot of, yeah, sure, we'll take a 1 yard carry or a 4 yard carry and go backwards 2 yards. He'll rip off 75 yards and then all of a sudden you're down 7-0 early on. So I think that's something for the Patriots where you need to maintain such discipline against him in that zone scheme that's trying to displace you as it goes wide, because they're built to handle that. I mean, you've got 2 defensive tackles, Devon Godchaux and Lawrence Guy, who can 2 gap, play gap and a half. And then Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips living in the box. When they're using these 3 safeties, often, 1 or 2 as a pseudo linebacker, like they're built to run side to side and watch for those cutback lanes, or meet you on the front side in some occasions. So I look at, obviously, the running game is a key part of that. Talking about run fits and discipline, not great for podcasting. So we'll skip to the more fun part about this. And that's Justin Jefferson, who already at 1,000 yards, 1,093 yards in the season, only 4 touchdowns. He has 105 targets. And the next closest is Adam Thielen with 67. So I have to imagine that Bill Belichick, as everyone knows, and they will say the odds are like minus 600, wants to make you play left-handed, take away your strength, blah, 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 blah. That's on a short week. That's what you got to do. Like I expect Justin Jefferson, as well as Jonathan Jones and Jalen Mills have been playing, to see some doubles. There's certainly a safety over the top. What do you expect from the Patriots and from Justin Jefferson? Is it as simple as I'm making it sound?
I think that I love the Bill Belichick kind of like all the cover one different variations that they have. Patriots are going to close. They're going to have that one high middle of the field closed look. And I would expect a double just because that's just shown to be successful against the Vikings offense. Now, earlier in the season, the Lions had a bunch of doubles and the Eagles did. And this is, of course, before the Vikings got TJ Hawkinson. So I think the book early on was, hey, let's get 4 eyes on Justin Jefferson and let's just get after Kirk. I think now it's a little bit different because really TJ Hawkinson has been a huge addition to the Vikings. And what's interesting is, of course, the Patriots have seen him already, right? So Bill Belichick, I think he respects Hawkinson in the way that, Kyle Duggar, maybe not shut him down, but he had a bunch of really, really good snaps against Hawkinson. So to me, it would be, okay, let's get 2 guys on Justin Jefferson. If Duggar can kind of take out Hawkinson in some sort of way, now we're really, really cooking with gas, right? I certainly respect Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne. I think Thielen's been a little banged up. Osborne, he's just in a different role in the offense where he's not supposed to really be winning a lot of these one-on-ones. He's really kind of running people off a lot of the time down the field. So, it's just because we can think about it, right? Talking about it. Not that it's quote easy to do, because you can have 2 guys on Justin Jefferson and he can still get open, right? And I would expect that to happen, in different ways on Thursday. But there is kind of a book written on the Vikings. Let's get guys on Jefferson. Now, Hawkinson's really a part of this attack, but the Patriots have those really unique bodies that can kind of take care of that. Let's get that pass rush home. And then I think hopefully it's not as long of a day as Sunday, but it could be certainly that long Thursday night for the Vikings.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Hawkinson-Duggar matchup. I mean, he was doing it so well where it's sometimes easier to say, oh, he held him to 0 for 4 when targeted. He was targeted once when Hawkinson had Kyle Duggar behind him. And there were some doubles and some help in the red zone and here and there. But ultimately, that was a lot of trust in a guy who, even as recently as parts of training camp, was struggling one-on-one with tight ends. And he's got all the physical ability in the world, and he's really more of these like jack of all trades kind of players. But Kyle Duggar's become so efficient in virtually all of those areas. And when you have a high leverage situation like that, 3rd down red zone, where you say, go take that guy and erase him, like that's a real weapon for them and really could change this game. Because when they missed him, which as recently as the first Jets game, his backup, Josh Bledsoe, gave up 2 touchdowns to Tyler Conklin. So that's an area where teams like to attack bigger bodies. And I know it sounds like that's the case with Minnesota, where they just go, Justin's getting so much attention. And if Adam can't pull that away, we need someone in the middle of the field to help do that. That trade was also surprising to me. Do you think Detroit didn't want to pay him in a year or 2 or just kind of gave up on him? Like, what was the read of Minnesota on that?
So I just like talking to some of the Lions guys, he seemed like he was loved around the locker room. And I don't know, maybe the Kwesi just has some secret sauce where he's convincing guys to kind of trade in division. Tight end is really interesting because not that it's quote undervalued, but you can pay less for a really kind of one of those top like 5-6 tight ends as opposed to having to pay like a really high end wide receiver. And man, the way the Vikings use Hawkinson is like a receiver. So I think it was a really, really good kind of, I think, situation for the Vikings where they didn't have to like fold their whole entire next draft. And, I don't know, maybe the Lions were asleep at the wheel a little bit or just had to kind of get things rolling, get a few more picks kind of as they continue their rebuild.
Yeah, because it just felt like kind of a young pillar of the roster, which no one's here for Lions roster building talk, but it's obviously worked out for them. And you mentioned the new GM, obviously with Kevin O'Connell in there too. It's interesting. Kevin O'Connell, and I'm going to jump ahead here as we get into our 3-2-1 preview. 3 matchups, 2 keys, 1 extra point. We just went really hard, granular football. Let's do the reverse. This is going to be 1, 2, 3. My 1 extra point is the fact that Kevin O'Connell, in this story is already going to come out, will be probably minus 1,000 on the broadcast. We mentioned 2008 draft pick of the Patriots. The Patriots also drafted that year Matthew Slater, who talked to us today, Monday, said that he's great friends with Kevin O'Connell, was in his wedding. They talk frequently. And I don't mention that because of the friendship. I mention it as someone who obviously understands how Belichick thinks and wants to defend. And he obviously, sometimes it didn't help when he's in LA and the Patriots are winning the Super Bowl 13-3. But in a short week, I think that's a really interesting subplot, and that this game probably won't come down to whatever they trot out in the first or second quarter, because it should just be a game dominated by defense. But I do wonder if there's just some sort of sense of like, he knows they're going to double Justin in these certain situations late in the game that should decide the outcome. And then ultimately has some sort of play call in his back pocket that says, we'll get TJ free here, or have some sort of motion to unlock that bracket or something to that effect. Am I overthinking this? What do you think of that angle?
I think maybe not overthinking it, but like Belichick, not that the book is out on Belichick, but like we know what his coverage menu is, right? Like we would expect a high dose of cover one and some rolls to doubles, right? To me, I got to spend a little time just talking about KOC. So I used to never really watch kind of coaching press conferences, just kind of think, obviously I know watching Belichick is real paint dry kind of stuff over there, but man, Kevin O'Connell, it's so hard. I kind of almost wish they were like 1-8 so I could see, well, what would he sound like when they're just losing all the time? Because, man, he is great to listen to. And what I really like is that all the other coaches, all the players are parroting him 100%. So you know that I think his message is getting across to people. But, I think O'Connell's been kind of in an interesting offensive system. It's really cool that he's been kind of with Belichick. But, hey, look, if Kevin O'Connell was drawing up the defense for the Vikings, he would probably double Jefferson and then get Isaac Hawkinson as well. So I don't know, but Bill Belichick's been around a long, long time. And I don't know if anyone's going to just draw anything up that's going to kind of beat him right away.
No, certainly not that. I didn't articulate it particularly well. And certainly someone who's been away from the building for so long, like he is one of dozens, if not maybe hundreds of assistant coaches or head coaches or players who have been around the block and can claim to have that some knowledge if that's a threshold. Like I hung out with him in 2008. But ultimately, I just think it's interesting as someone who's been in the building, coached outside of it, and has perhaps as well-rounded a view, I would say, of Belichick and that defense and being in the building as anyone in the league outside of people who may have left the organization the last 3-4 years. So something to keep in the back of your head. All right, let's move forward. Let's go to 2. Give me one key for the Vikings to win.
So I really think that if we see like a big Vikings win on Thursday, it's going to be the offensive line just kind of putting it together in some sort of way. Where I think Judon is special. I know that you're going to talk about him at some point, I'm sure through the rest of the week. And really on that interior of the offensive line, like, are we going to be able to figure out how to kind of pass off stunts, right? We're going to have a backup left tackle in there. Are we going to be able to protect? Right? Are we going to be able to be aggressive in the run game and be able to get down there? And because kind of talking about at the top, right, a quarterback in a good situation, that's where Kirk Cousins and Mac Jones is going to thrive, right? So Kirk Cousins is not going to be able to get deep into his progression, particularly against a team that I would expect to at least shut down or try to shut down Justin Jefferson if he doesn't have the time to do it, right? And I can, open the Madden playbook, the NCAA 2004 playbook, and think of every single offensive kind of play there is. Nothing works really if that offensive line faces the same exact issues as the Cowboys did. And what I did like is Kirk wasn't just throwing the ball straight into kind of the defensive hands. So it maybe look a little bit different than how the Patriots had it against the Jets. But I think that if the Vikings come out of this game feeling good, it is really because the offensive line overperformed.
Yeah. And it's funny how much of that stays true with the Patriots, right? Like a lot of us in this market beginning on Matt Patricia for play calling. There's certainly a lot of validity to that. But at some point, like, yeah, sure, hand us the play sheet and say 2 of your offensive linemen are backups, another one's banged up. And overall, they've been among the worst lines the last 4 months or last 4 weeks. So, I think for the Patriots, setting the offensive line aside, it's going to be boring as hell. I think you have to win the field position game, because if this is going to be close, the Vikings are favored by 3. Of course, neutral field, says Vegas says this is a coin toss. You need to win on the margins. And if you can do a good enough job on Kirk Cousins, which, this is a box to check every single week, limit and contain the opposing quarterback, then you need to give Mac Jones an edge like the offense had against the Jets, where they're getting into Jets territory and not finishing those drives, but at least they were there. Like that's what got them a field goal, let them attempt another one. They should attempt more than 2 field goals or have 2 more 2+ scoring opportunities against the Vikings. But we'll only know that if they aren't backed up, at their own 10, and what will be a very hostile environment, one of the better home crowds in the league. So I think whether it's more returns for Marcus Jones, of course, turnovers already help, or just managing to flip the field when you are backed up to your 10, get to midfield, okay, and force them to go 90 yards, I think is going to be a big key. So from 1 to 2 to 3, 3 matchups that interest you. We've talked about a bunch. What are your 2?
So one that I really want to harp on, it's not a player versus player matchup, but really the offensive play callers versus first down, right? I think first down is so frustrating. I know that the success rate for both the Vikings and the Patriots are pretty low, but the Vikings have so many offensive threats. And I keep saying, right, they get to run into light boxes. I think they also can get into heavy personnel. Patriots are going to be playing that probably one high shell either way and really get to play action. So I want to have an offensive play caller who is aggressive on first down and not just running into those boxes and, taking your 3 yards. Obviously, you learn a lot of information just by lining up and running the ball, right? You see how the defense is aligned to it. And I think that kind of could be similar for the Patriots, right? Like maybe not, I don't think that obviously Mac is at the level that Kirk is right now, but I want to see success on first down, right? Whether it's I need to run more play action on first down. And it seemed like, the Patriots had some interesting kind of play action designs, especially, that sail route that's been a little bit difficult at times for the Vikings. So however you do it, I need to see just success on first downs. To me, for the Vikings, I think that's through play action. I think that the Patriots would be able to do that as well, even the way that the Vikings play kind of light in the box.
We're going on week 12 here. That is my favorite key. Matt Patricia versus first down, because at least it's not me banging the same drum on this podcast about you need to throw more on first down where their success rate. I tweeted this today with runs was 16% against the Jets. And it's about a 50-50 split run and pass, which there's, it's a more dynamic ratio than just, hey, pass all the time and you'll get the 64% success rate, which they had. There needs to be a balance, but it's just been such a struggle, and the lack of play action where they're among the lowest teams in the league in terms of how often you call in play action before you actually run the ball. Not understanding, like, you can have success without a strong run game. Like, that myth has been dispelled as far as how many times you run it, how effective your running game is, or any of these different variables. Yes, they're linked in a way, but it's not so strongly that you need to achieve one and go step 1 to step 2 being play action. Like, just fake a run and then take the yards you can get against simpler coverages on early downs. As far as me, you spoiled it. Matt Judon against Blake Brandel, and thank God that's hopefully his last name, because as far as one-on-one matchups go, A, your best players always have to show on the road. B, you need to exploit those matchups where you have the greatest advantage. And right now, those two are one of the same defensively. And getting to Kirk with just 4, where the Patriots have been among the best, if not the best lately, defenses at succeeding with a 4-man rush will be huge on the road, and then devoting extra resources to, Justin Jefferson, because there are only so many 1-double calls you can leave one-on-one matchups everywhere else and have confidence in. But if you're in, to Tampa 2 that they like to play in different downs or whatever you want to call, that's easiest done when you're getting a 4-man rush. And I think it's going to be Judon coming off of the offense's left, whichever way this game goes, whether he gets home or whether he doesn't.
Yeah, I think that, I'm sorry to spoil that one, but that is really such a big part of this game, right? It's so hard coming off of what we just watched on the Vikings end, where the Cowboys were just able to blow up the entire game by constantly being able to rush, and then thinking, oh man, we're going to have to face a front that is good. Right. Like, ideally, you don't have to have that. And I love the old kind of Brady days when people say, oh, the way to beat Brady is you pressure him up the middle. It's like, well, yeah, anytime you can really force a quarterback off his spot and pressure him, you're probably going to have success. And that does not change, between Cousins or Mac Jones. And as you said, Kirk's not going to be running around, the same way Justin Fields was against the Patriots. He's getting, I think he's played well on particular plays against pressure, but oh man, I keep sighing, and I just keep getting more pessimistic about this matchup, just thinking about Matt Judon and those beautiful long sleeves getting after Kirk.
Well, find me a human being who loves any other human being running straight at them, looking to tackle them, like with hands in their face, literally and figuratively. Like, of course, no one likes that. It's the exact point. Same with Brady. Oh, get to Brady with 4. Like, great. That's the key to any good pass defense, and is really the kind of, as I deemed it last week, writing about all the different analytics that support the Patriots are really doing work with 4. Like, that's it. It's a very plain magic. If you can do that, you can play defense against virtually anyone in the NFL, provided your run defense, isn't like what we saw from the Patriots against Justin Fields. And going 1-2-3 with our 3-2-1 matchup here in the pod, I skipped your extra point. Do you have an extra thought that, as I DM'd you, could just be completely irrelevant to the matchup, but something that kind of has your interest here on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, on Thanksgiving, other than, turkey just being just a generic dry bird, I was interested in, seeing Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins against each other. I think, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but if Mac Jones reaches like Kirk Cousins' level of play through his career, like I think that's like pretty much his, like, close to his ceiling, right? Like, wouldn't Patriots fans they'd be so happy to have Mac Jones like at that Kirk Cousins level?
Yeah, the highest, the optimist was saying Matt Ryan. coming out of the draft. And I think the way that he inspired such confidence with one of the best statistical rookie seasons, in recent league history, the idea of like Kirk Cousins, who gets, again, similar to the primetime Kirk thing, it's much more of a narrative. Like the fact that he is just so openly a dork, and we'll save all the back stuff for another day, like brings his stock down a little bit. In reality, like Kirk's stock's not bad. You can win with him, maybe not because of him all the time, but, like the guy's got the numbers that he has, for a reason. And so I think Mac Jones, again, is a pocket bound guy who's not going to create on his own, but, can beat almost any defense in the league. Yeah, I think absolutely the Patriots would take that, especially since, that guy who we saw in his rookie season regressed up until Sunday when he reappeared, and yet it wasn't good enough because the environment around him was so not conducive to producing points that they went home with 3. And Marcus Jones, thankfully, handed them 7 on the way out, and they won 10-3. So, yeah, I think people would be thrilled with Kirk Cousins as much as who was it? Joe Dolan on this pod described, Kirk is kind of a Magoo during our fantasy preview, and that's just whatever. It's a personality.
Yeah, now Kirk O'Chains is a little bit different than Kirk Magoo, certainly. But it's going to be fun. And obviously, I hope that every player reaches their ceiling. But I think what's hard for a lot of people to realize is there's very few quarterbacks that are like the top end, right? Like there's elite, and then there's Patrick Mahomes, obviously has a different category, and it just doesn't grow on trees. But I would like to think that you can make your offense should be your quarterback, in a certain way, or it should be shaped around your quarterback. Obviously, like Tua's offense looks a certain way, and not that Mac Jones and the Patriots can look like that, particularly with Tyreek Hill and such. But I don't know, maybe continue to lean more into those kind of Alabama days. I would just like to see quarterback put in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting tug and pull here because A, he's been hurt, but B, the idea of could you build an offense that's better suited to the other 10 players on offense versus the quarterback, and how much power does the quarterback have? Because I think a lot of this, and people saw this as proof of concept with Bailey Zappi when he came in under center, man block running game, a lot of play action shots, which we saw some with Brady towards the end versus the shotgun oriented, a little bit more RPO offense and quick game all over the place with Mac Jones. And they've tried to marry that. And I thought did a decent job. Like, again, it was not just rookie Mac as far as his individual performance. The way they handled him in that Jets game was very similar. All but one of his 33 dropbacks were shotgun pass or under center play action. And that's trying to marry the two of what they do best. But there's a reason here in week 12, we, the media, keep asking, so you got that offensive identity yet? But you don't need any of that. The Vikings have their offensive identity. They've got an identity of we're just going to do our homework and stay up all night with these papers and then squeak out a win and a B- or a B and be 8-2, despite all the analytics saying that paper wasn't very good. But you know what? In the NFL, 8-2 is an A. Shawn, any final predictions here for this game? Thanksgiving, anything we didn't cover?
No, I feel like both teams kind of go into this thinking they can win, which usually that makes for good football. But I really just feel like this could be just a mess of a game. And it's funny watching the Cowboys, beat up the Vikings. That's a specific kind of mess. The Patriots Jets was another specific kind of mess. I think this can be closer to that Patriots Jets game, but it's so hard for a defense to just shut out an offense, right? The way the Patriots did to the Jets. So I guess I'm hoping not, but in my kind of heart of hearts, I do think the Patriots are going to be able to pull this out. I think, like you mentioned, on the margins, the Vikings, they've had a few issues kind of in the kicking game. I think that's something where maybe the Patriots can get into those positive field possession situations and able to hit some of those field goals. So it's going to be low scoring. I think it could be in that kind of 17-14 kind of range. And, maybe not my heart, but I guess my head, I think, does lean a little bit towards the Patriots. And that certainly could be influenced by the just massive wave of pessimism coming off that Cowboys loss for the Vikings.
Yeah, what's funny about that, and I wish I had brought this up earlier, but we talked with Kyle Duggar today, and my colleague Karen Gregan at the Herald mentioned, hey, what's the film you watch more? Obviously, the recent game is a huge blowout versus maybe some of their earlier games. And his point was you get a lot more value and information out of the close games because you see the go-to plays when there's stress there from the coordinators or the play callers of this is what they believe in, this is who they are, which is what anyone is under pressure. That's who you are. That's what you're made of. And so, I think they'll skip over that Dallas game, which is, again, might confirm all the priors about the analytics community about who the Vikings are. But ultimately, when you look at their results, is an outlier game because they've been winning more often than not, and certainly not losing by 37. Now, are the elements as far as Dallas's pressure go could surface again with the Patriots. Yes, absolutely. And for that reason, I think this is going to be like a wrestling match and mud, and nobody wins for 3.5 quarters. Like, I don't know, maybe this is Jello wrestling, but they replace it with pudding, and the pudding's like 4 days old. Like, it's just going to be, no one wants to watch this by the end of the fourth quarter. Okay. This is going to be bad. But in the end, I think it is something that I hit on earlier, where Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook can do something that none of the Patriots skill position players, aside from Andre Stevenson, can. And that's break a long one, a touchdown at any second. And I think that's what happens. This is similar to the Patriots loss at Indianapolis last year. Jonathan Taylor puts them away late with a breakaway touchdown. On a short week, I think they break, and this is something like 19-13 Vikings in the end.
Andrew, can't argue with that too much. Because I keep going back and forth, right? Do you think, well, who is the best player on the field? I think it's Justin Jefferson. Who is the best unit in the entire game? I think it's the Patriots defense. The way that football goes is, the offense is meant to score points, right? Like the way the rules are, the way the refs, I think they're holding flags and such. It is meant to help that offense. And, I'm not gonna be too mad if we see some gritting in the end zone on Thursday night.
Yeah, and look, that could be Mac Jones as well, who pulled off a hell of a gritty at the Pro Bowl last year. Not just Justin Jefferson.
A great point.
But I think most of the world would prefer the Justin Jefferson version outside of New England. Strictly talking about the dance moves. So that's it. All right, Shawn Syed, you have come on, done a great job. Thank you so much for the breakdown of the Vikings, watching some Patriots film, being super prepared. You can find him on Twitter at SYED Schemes. Full breakdowns of anything, and at the Daily Norseman for SB Nation, the best of Vikings X's and O's content out there. Thank you, sir.
Andrew, thanks so much, man. Looking forward to that Thursday night game. Guys, everyone try your best. Let's stay awake on that second piece of pie through that kind of wrestling match of a game.